Oh, hello, and we're in Deuteronomy, chapter 17, and we'll look at the first 7 verses this time, rather than doing the whole chapter in a one. So let's read it, reading from the NIV. Do not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or sheep that has any defect or flaw in it, for that would be detestable to him. If a man or woman are living among you in one of the towns the Lord gives you is doing evil in the eyes of the Lord your God, in violation of his covenant, and contrary to my command, has worshipped other gods, bowing down to them, or to the sun, or the moon, or the stars in the sky, and this has been brought to your attention, then you must investigate it thoroughly. If it is true, and it has been proved that this detestable thing has been done in Israel, take the man or woman who has done this evil deed to your city gate and stone that person to death. On the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a person is to be put to death. But no one is to be put to death on the testimony of only 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses must be the first in putting that person to death, then the hands of all the people. You must purge the evil from among you. Well, let's just do the first verse first. It is perhaps the easier one to deal with. And the key thing there is that sacrifice to the Lord has to be perfect. And there's 2 lessons to draw from that. First of all, remember, way back in Genesis, Cain and Abel both offered sacrifices. Abel offered the best of his flock. It says Cain, after some time, offered some of the crops he'd grown. Abel's sacrifice was accepted, Cain's was not. And there is that, if we give to God, we give the best to God, not just something spare stuff we got lying around we don't need or anything. Well, secondly, the sacrifices in the Old Testament is a shadow of what was to come. It talks a lot about that in the book of Hebrews. And the sacrifices were pointing towards Jesus. And Jesus was the perfect sacrifice. He was without defect or flaw. He was without sin. Right, let's now look at verses 2 to 7. Now, we probably react against it. 2 things in particular. First of all, this person who was guilty of idol worship is to be put to death. And we think, oh, well, that's a bit harsh, a bit tough. And then secondly, the bit about the person being stoned to death and the witness being having the one to throw the first stone. Well, just first of all, a couple of things. 1, sacrificing to idols is extremely serious. And we might think, well, it's just some stone god or wooden god or whatever, and they've offered some sacrifice, who cares? Throughout the Old Testament, and in the New for that matter, idol worship is taken very seriously. And idol worship was again and again was Israel's downfall. And it never came by itself. They didn't just worship idols and that was it. It brought with it injustice. It brought sexual exploitation. It brought bloodshed. And no doubt other things as well. Exploitation of the poor. All sorts of things went wrong. It did not just come by itself. So it was extremely serious. Now, we don't go around stoning people today. Just to make that clear in case anyone was under any misapprehensions. But sin matters. And then you've got the witnesses. The witness had to cast the first stone. Remember, Jesus was talking about who will cast the first stone when the woman was caught in adultery. What is happening there is that the person, it's not just being a witness and just giving some testimony, and you've got no involvement in the consequences. It's stressing the seriousness of what you're doing. If you're giving testimony that someone else is guilty of something extremely serious, that is a very serious matter. Now that's just what that is doing. Let's look at it more. Things which we absolutely don't react against, but which our society sometimes abandon. First of all, everything had to be tested by 2 or 3 witnesses, not just 1. I think it's right that in the English legal system, I think you can do things with 1 witness. In Scottish legal system at present, you cannot. Though there were some moves to remove that. If I've got any of these details wrong, just forgive me. But there are some legal systems where one witness is enough, and in general, one witness is not enough. One witness, what they say might be perfectly true, but it might be they're mistaken. Not deliberately, but they are just mistaken. But they can also be malicious. It happens. So it's just ensuring that justice is done properly. And then it says that things have to be investigated properly. And all crimes need to be investigated properly. Not just accepted, because things can be taken just because of the sort of mob rule type approach. Or with the Me Too movement, there's something was saying you should always believe the woman. That is an absolutely stupid and idiotic statement. Women should be taken seriously and the matter investigated properly. But you don't just believe any accusation. It doesn't matter what the crime or the supposed crime is. It has to be investigated properly. And what you'll find in the law, there are some things which we react against. Because people get killed. Being putting people to death or whatever. But there's an awful lot in there which our societies can learn from. There is a great deal of concern for justice throughout the law of God. And on that note, we'll leave things.